everyone. My name is Allison Simmerly, and I'm a meal advisor at Catholic Relief Services and a co-chair of the Humanitarian Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning, or HuMEL peer network. Unfortunately, the recording of today's session missed the introduction, so I've recorded one just as a lead-in for the session recording. We were very excited to host another HuMEL webinar today after a bit of a break. There may be some of you listening in who aren't familiar with this group. If that's you, HuMEL is a peer-to-peer learning network for M&E practitioners working in the humanitarian space. And we tried to cover a range of participant-identified priority topics and are always eager to feature voices and experiences from the field. So please do always feel free to get in touch. Today's session is the first in a series of 3, zooming in on effective communication strategies and tips. I know as meal professionals, we spend a lot of time focusing on numbers and metrics, and the key intent of the storytelling series is really to help unpack how we can tell the story of the data we work with effectively. So today we were joined by CRS Emergency Communications Director Caroline Brennan and CRS Communications Officer Megan Gilbert for part 1 of the series, Communicating for Influence. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening in. Be sure to look for upcoming events on the HuMEL site.
We're witnessing around the world a landscape of increasing division, misperception of in some cases, compassion fatigue, or even fear of the other. So you have a role to play at this particular moment in time in representing so many of the issues that you are responding to around the world. And we collectively share in that effort to best serve those communities that we serve and to represent on their behalf, especially for those who don't have the platforms that we benefit from in the work that we have. So where do we start in upping our game? And that begins with telling the story that we have to tell, the story of our work and the story of why it matters. And so often when we're talking about the work that we do, we can be so in it. We understand the data so well. We know the programs. We've been working in it for years, but it can still be difficult to articulate why it matters when we're taken out of our working context and speaking to others who aren't as close to it. And even Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough. And sometimes we can think about when we're trying to explain a complex issue simply, it can feel like we're dumbing something down, and it's actually the opposite. It takes a lot of intention to explain a complex topic clearly for those who are far from it to want to engage and understand. So here we are. We want to share some tips with you to be successful in these efforts through different ways. And the first is I want to share with you 4 key questions that help you to crystallize your message in whatever format of storytelling you might have that in your work that you might be facing this week, later today, in the coming month. It could be a presentation. It could be a conversation you have that's going to be very important. It could be the mapping out of a proposal. These are 4 questions that I highly recommend just keeping in your back pocket when you're thinking about how do I phrase something? I have to talk about this issue. Where do I start? Here are 4 ways to start. First is understanding why and being able to articulate why this issue. I imagine in your work, in your country programs are responding to many issues. CRS as an agency responds to many issues. Those we are talking to are hearing about many issues. So why are you talking about this particular issue as opposed to others? Why now? What is the urgency? Why can't it wait? Especially for issues that are chronic that we might be talking about again and again, and being able to explain the urgency of why it matters now is very important in your communications. Why CRS? What is our particular vantage point in speaking to this issue? Why should anyone listen to us versus somebody else? What is our expertise on this or perspective? And then why you, the audience? So whoever you might be speaking to, if it's a donor, if it's a potential partner, whoever it might be, everyone wants to know, what do I have to do? What does it have to do with me? What's my value add? Let them know we need you because it allows us to do X, Y, and Z, or it will have this added impact when you are engaged in this way. that component is very important to include as well. These are just 4 questions that can help you shape your messaging as a starting point, but it is just a skeleton. It is not complete because there is a critical piece that is missing that only you can bring because of your background, your personal and professional experience, and your work. And that is the emotional ingredient. This is structure, this is the skeleton, but you need the muscles to hang this information on. And the reason I say that is because we at CRS are often in a common formula of how we communicate. It looks a little like this on your screen. We give background to an issue. We, give evidence to that issue with lots of data and information. We explain the nature, nuance of the problem, the complexity, and then we often explain how we are responding. But what's missing in this component, which is the difference between communicating to inform and communicating to influence, is including that human element. So what does this mean in people's lives? And I know that we all know this because we're in this work. We see it. We've been drawn to this work because I imagine we care about the impact in people's lives. So we know this inherently and intellectually, but sometimes we forget to take our communication to that extra step to explain that clearly. For example, we can show lots of data about migration patterns in Latin and Central America, and that's very important data. I'll just say this out of the gate. It is critical. Everything that Megan and I are sharing is not in any way diminishing the value of this data. What we're sharing is how we can elevate it and make it even stronger. So you can have a chart like this that shows important patterns, levels of displacement, numbers that indicate a rising trend. But what you need to take it to the next level to do more than just inform is take it down a level in people's lives. What does this mean? What decisions are families having to make? Are they having to separate from each other when we're talking about migration? What are the pressures of the family providers? Explain it. Don't assume someone will know. They don't know. You are closer to this issue than probably anyone else you are talking to about it. So you need to bring in this human perspective. We are a humanitarian organization, so we cannot leave this out. And it may sound obvious, but I can tell you in so much of our communications, it's missing. We just forget. We talk about it in big numbers, movements of mass populations, impact on mass populations, but at that individual level, what are the stakes if we don't respond? Having to articulate that. And the reason I say this is because we know that while information leads people to understanding a subject matter, it is emotion that drives their behavior. Tons of studies across geographies, across industries, across demographics show that while information, stats, data, reports leads people to greater comprehension on a subject matter, which is important, it is emotion, that ingredient, that is the changing agent that takes someone from understanding it to actually wanting to do something, to give, to advocate, to get involved. So we always want to be in that sweet spot of weaving in all of that important data and information, but including an emotional element that is like your glue. If you're throwing all of this information at someone, you want it to stick. And that is what makes it stick. And that is not just, it's speaking to the heartstrings. This is not anecdotal information. This is actually how we are wired as human beings. There was a scientific study. It's called the Golden Circle. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but feel free to acknowledge in the comments if you have. It's actually one of the most popular TED Talks. I highly recommend if you look up Golden Circle TED Talk. I think it's the second most viewed. But essentially, a scientist, get this, a scientist created a pattern to codify why some people inspire and others don't. And he looked at how leaders and organizations communicate and who falls in the inspirational, influential bucket and all those who do not. And the difference was this. He noticed that pretty much every organization, leader can communicate what they do. We do X, Y, and Z. We do water, agriculture, health, you name it. Some can communicate how they do what they do. And I think actually CRS is pretty good in this space because how we approach our work is pretty defining to our identity, the holistic approach, integral human development, dignity as the undercurrent, protection. I think we're actually stronger than a lot of other agencies in this space. But few organizations and leaders can really articulate why they do what they do, why it matters. Most people go from the clearest thing, the cut and dry, and they get a little weaker in the fuzziest, this why category. But the thing is, when we're talking about being an agency of influence or professional of influence, people don't buy into what you do. They're buying into why you do it. That's how you ignite that inspiration to take part as a partner or as a donor, whatever it might be. And this is not just, psychology is actually biology. Our brains are broken down into three components that correspond with the golden circle. Our newest brain, the more evolved part of our brain, the neocortex, corresponds with the what. This is the part of our brain that is responsible for our analytical thinking, our rational thought, our language, all of that sort of more sophisticated element of our ways of being human beings. But the middle part make up the limbic brains, and that's responsible for feelings, for things like loyalty, for behavior. This is the part of the brain, again, not the rational part of our brain. This is the part of the brain that is not only responsible for our feelings, but for decision making, and it has no capacity for language. The study that looked at who inspires and who doesn't noticed in their communications that they all shared one thing. They all first speak to the why something matters, that emotional ingredient, because when you do that, when you speak to the why, you activate the part of the brain that controls behavior or decision making. You want people to do something, so you want to activate that part of the brain. And once you do that, then you allow people to rationalize their decisions with all the tangible things we say and show and do. So in other words, yes, we can just stay communicating the what of what we do. And that's fine if we only want to inform, but we want to influence, which means we need to change how we think about how we communicate and always capture the why. Just take it to that next level. What does this mean in people's lives? How can I tell it from a human perspective? Even Martin Luther King, our civil rights leader here in the United States, as he stood before millions of people in Washington, D.C. to inspire a movement, he did not stand before them and say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. And of course he had a plan that mobilized millions of people across the country in a sophisticated civil rights movement, but to bring them, he inspired with a dream. So when we talk about an emotional agreement, it's not really just thinking about how to tug on the heartstrings. You're really trying to get people into the space. It's like your doorway to get people into the room. The room can be all of your evidence and your data and this amazing programming that you are supporting. But that door to get them in is that emotional aspect, that human component, the why it matters. We can't forget to include that. People do forget. Followers, they say, start with the what. They communicate in that space. That's where they are. That's fine. We are more than fine. We want to be leaders, and communicators who are leaders and who are influencers start with the why. So honestly, once you start communicating and thinking about that in your communications, you will already set yourself apart from the rest. Most people don't do this. So it's a leverage point that you can immediately build into your communications. So here's one example. I just have a 3-minute exercise. So get your pens and paper or get a little Word doc ready on your computer. And I just want to ask you 3 questions. And there's only a minute to respond to each. So we're just going with the gut here. It's not perfect wording in any respect, but I want you to think about a topic that you are asked to speak about or represent. Maybe it's the project you are supporting, the data you are developing. What's something that either in your immediate future you are asked to speak to, or perhaps on a regular basis you're having to represent? So have that in mind. And now we have a minute for each, okay? And I just want you to write it down first as personal reflection. But for those of you who want to share, it's welcome to share in the chat as well. But first, let's go back to those key questions that honestly keep in your back pocket. Why this issue? So you've just thought about the topic that you're asked to speak to. Lots of topics and issues in the world. If you were having to explain to someone why this issue is important as opposed to the others, what do you want to say? I'm just going to give 55 seconds to just reflect and write that down. Okay, and now the second question is, why now? What's the urgency? Why can't it wait? And for those of you who want to share in the chat, you're welcome to. You can put your topic, and I'll see if I can even see the chat here. Thank you. But what's the urgency? Okay, and then the last is, this is just a bonus really, but it's something that is your glue, your human element. What does it mean in people's lives? It can be a story or detail. What would be your human component that you would weave into your communications? Let's say you have a topic you need to present on. What's a story? You don't have to write it down, the whole story. But if you know in your mind, I can explain it in a human way by referencing this moment in time, this experience with this person, this story or human detail. And if you could just reference that with a phrase to have that ready. And sometimes a story from a different part of your work or different place and time is still relevant to the project you are now. If you're thinking, I'm never out in the field, I don't know, I don't have this interaction. You've been called, you've come into this work for a reason. There's something somewhere along the way that inspired you to be in this work. So if you don't have a personal experience of interfacing with a program participant, or if you're struggling, you can always just start there. What inspires you to be in this work, and share that as well as a starting point. So these are just small things to have in your back pocket. There are 2 other questions, but for sake of time, but I hope you have them. Why this issue? Why now? Why CRS? Why you? Again, if you just keep those at your side, they really will help you just as a starting point when you are asked to represent or pull information together. But now let's talk about how we tell this in person and represent in our presentation skills. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Megan Gilbert, who some of you might know as well from our many webinars and other communications training, and we'll get into those details for representation. Megan, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. I really want to stress like how important it is that, all of us in communications work together with all of you in MEAL, because we really are important to each other, I think, in a lot of ways. We have these stories, we collect these stories, but that data is really important. It helps us say, this isn't just one person. We have all these numbers to go to back this up. And so I really do encourage, for those of you who work at CRS, to work with your comms colleagues, for those of you who work in other organizations, to work together with comms colleagues, because I really do think when we work together, when we combine our skills and our information, that's when influence happens, because we can make those, emotional connections with the stories, but we have that reason, that data to help people draw conclusions, because both of them, are really important that we have those two things together. One of the reasons that we're talking about public speaking today is that, there is a lot that you can do in your voice, in your body language, in all of those situations where we have the opportunity to talk to people. You can use that to influence. And I'm thinking about making those emotional connections. There is so much that you can do with your tone, with your facial expressions, all of those things. So that's why I wanted to talk about that today. Now, we don't have a ton of time. And a lot of times when we're working on public speaking, it's something that I do individually, because what works for one person might not work for other people. But what I want to give you today is some of the tools for you to start working on public speaking. Because what I really want you to do is learn how to use it effectively, because I will say that sometimes our public speaking styles can work against us, and we're just going to talk about ways to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I'm curious, though, to hear from all of you. When I even said public speaking, what were your thoughts about it? How do you feel about public speaking? I can see the chat, so anyone wants to type in their thoughts on it. It can be, I feel great when it's a small group. I get really nervous when it's a big group. I love it. I can't stand it. I'm indifferent to it. I'm saying all these things because that's usually the mix that I hear. Okay, so we've got some fear, cool. Lots of preparation, nervous when it's people I don't know or a big group, daunting, usually a little nervous till the minute I start. Can be intimidating. Oh, fear, dread, sweaty palms, lose words in my head. Still get nervous. Well, I will tell you too that I have been a public speaker for, probably decades. And I still get nervous. So I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse. I am in the same type too, that I get energized. After public speaking, I get energized before as well. Kind of depends on how it goes. But I'm not surprised to see all of these reactions in the chat, because it's what I often see from people. So I have some good news, I think, for all of you. For any of you who have that fear, who have like, oh my gosh, they dread it. I believe everyone can get better at this skill. It just, again, takes some preparation, it takes some practice, and it takes continuous work. I still try to work on it, even though I do have a lot of experience as a public speaker. I was a former television news journalist, so a lot of it was on live TV. So I've had all kinds of things go wrong, and I think that kind of helps me with my nerves when it comes to public speaking. But here's the thing. I think a lot of us have this vision of what we think a really good public speaker is. And that's probably true, whatever vision you have, that is. But the thing about public speaking is it's not about fitting into this mold. It's not about like, oh, I want to be a TED Talk speaker that has like 1 million views on your video. I can make maybe some of you into that TED Talk speaker that has 1 million views. But what it really is, you don't have to be that to be effective. You don't have to be the Barack Obamas, the Brene Browns, the Oprah Winfrey, whoever it is that you admire as a public speaker. That's not what you have to be. So I hope that is good news for all of you. What you have to be is authentic. What you have to be is yourself. So say it's simple. All you got to do is be yourself and everything will be fine. All right. I know that that's not the most helpful advice. It's about being the best version of yourself when it comes to being a good public speaker. Because here's the thing. You have to connect with your audience. Like, being authentic and connecting with your audience are the two most important things that you can do as a public speaker. If you stumble a little bit, if you maybe pause and forget where you're going, that happens. Not a big deal. If you're authentic and connect, all of that will be forgiven. All of that is something people won't even remember when you're done. So what I want to help you realize is, what is your authentic self? Who do you want to be as a public speaker? Start focusing on that, and then you will realize that you have the skills, that you have the ability. It's just a matter of figuring out, what that is for you. And I think it's really important. I'll talk about this a little bit later as well, about, thinking about your audience and where they are in the moment, when thinking about where they are in general is really going to go a long way for you when it comes to figuring out who you are as a public speaker. So we're going to start here with you. Like, how do you figure out like who I am, who I want to be, and what comes naturally to you? What is your natural speaking style? Because one thing I do also want to mention is that I think, when I'm talking about public speaking in this space, I just mean any time when you're having a conversation with people, anytime you have to speak. So it could be one person, two people, big room, small room, virtually, in person. I'm putting it all together in that group. Is that we think, oh, I can be really good in a small group because I'm myself. I can speak conversationally, but oof, big room, and I just lose all of it. Your public speaking style shouldn't change drastically depending on the size of the room, the people in the audience, whether it's virtual or in person. The core of who you are and how you present should be pretty much the same. Now, obviously, you do have to make adjustments. Maybe it's a more formal audience, so maybe you make adjustments there. Maybe there are some cultural differences. But it's adjustments. It's not changing everything you are. I am a person who, you probably may have noticed, I speak with my hands a lot. I'd like to think of myself as conversational, kind of a relaxed style. That is always who I'm going to be, no matter where I am, no matter who I am speaking to. I do realize if I'm in a big room, I gotta be bigger in some way. I do realize if I'm speaking in a more formal situation, I may need to be a little bit more formal. So I keep those things in mind. So I make adjustments. We're not changing things, we're making adjustments. So let's think about that, who you are. Part of this you can do yourself. Part of this you might need a little bit of help with people that you know well. And it's thinking about, what impressions do you give people when you just first meet them? Like what words pop into their head? So what are those first impressions and what are those lasting impressions? Do people always describe you as knowledgeable, as maybe quiet or reserved, which is also can be fine as a public speaking style? Do they call you engaging? All of those things. And then think about what you're doing that's giving those impressions. It's probably a combination of what you're saying, of your facial expressions, your body language. So keeping those things in mind, like, okay, I see that. And then maybe what's missing from that. Say, well, people describe me as trustworthy and knowledgeable, but I really wish they described me more as an authority in this space, or I wish they described me as more entertaining. It can be anything. So it's figuring out, here are some things that I know I do well. I can always use this, but if I really want to really improve my public speaking skills, I want to add a little bit of this into that. It really is thinking about your brand. And I know for some people they get, I know I sometimes like, oh, I don't know if I like that. Like, I'm branding myself, but think about it. Like, you are loyal to a brand because you know what to expect from them. So that's what this is getting people to know what to expect when they are speaking to you, when they meet you. And of course, we want that to be a positive thing, knowing what to expect. So that's what this is about being consistent in who you are and how you present, so people learn you, know you, and become comfortable with all of you. So what are some of the things that get in the way from us being authentic and helping us connect with our audience? Well, I've kind of really talked about this one, is that we try to be someone else. Is that we think, well, I have this big audience, I need to be more of a formal speaker. So I'm going to lose all of my personality and just be what I think is supposed to be this perfect public speaker. you can't connect with people because they can see that you're not being yourself. I mean, you've probably seen that and noticed that in other people, that like, wow, they seem a little fake is sometimes the word that we use. So we get nervous and we let that overcome us. So I noticed a lot of people say palms sweaty, nervous, and that really can get in the way because we just like lose all confidence in ourselves. I wish I could tell you that there is a way to remove all of your nerves. I kind of try to get energy from my nerves. I just prepare as much as I can. That always helps with my nerves. And please feel free to use the chat if you have some tips and tricks that you have used that have helped you overcome nervousness. But here's my advice when it comes to overcoming nerves. You have to ask yourself, like, what am I nervous about? Like, what am I afraid is going to happen? Am I afraid I'm going to forget what I'm going to say? Am I afraid that I'm not going to know the answer to a question? Am I afraid because this really isn't my area of expertise, so I don't feel like I know enough? Or is it, I think people are all I have imposter syndrome and people are going to think I'm a fraud? Any other fears, please feel free to use the chat if I've missed a couple of fears. So what I do is I address those things. Are you afraid you're going to forget what you're going to say? Have some notes. We all use notes. No harm in using notes. No harm in letting your, see, that's the key. I love that. What's the worst possible scenario? No one's ever literally died of embarrassment. It's never happened. I've looked it up. Exactly. What is the worst that can happen? So it's addressing. So there's nothing wrong with using notes. I use notes. I look down. I do those things because that's one of my fears. I'm going to forget what I'm going to say. If it's a topic you're not super familiar with, stick to basics. And if people ask you questions you don't know the answer to, it's okay to say, you know what, that is a really good question. I have some information. Here's what I do know, but I'm gonna look this up and I'm gonna get more detail for you. And then actually follow up. No one knows everything about everything. It's okay not to know something. And if you just handle it like that, again, people will be like, oh, okay, that's great. Thank you for doing that. The imposter syndrome, maybe you need a little pep talk. If it's virtual, have some positive affirmations. Here's the thing too. Are you really a fraud? No. You all know what you're talking about. So if you need your pep talk, you just come talk to me and I will build you up. I was doing that for my daughter last night. It was a presentation today. She gets so nervous and she's so afraid of negative feedback. So I was trying to give her that pep talk last night. So we all get nervous, but we have to make sure that it doesn't derail us. We do what is safe. So we take our reports, we just slap them on some slides and we just read it. Like, I won't forget my place if I just read it. I will tell you that we don't influence people if we just do what is safe. We don't inspire people if we just do what is safe. Challenge yourself. Don't put a bunch of information on slides. Don't read your script. And again, what's the worst that could happen? It's going to be okay. I promise you. And I think too, I lose my place. I use filler words. I sometimes stutter. And it really is about laughing it off. And I know that is so much harder, to do. I can say that to all of you, but think of yourself as an audience member and you see people that are starting to fall apart and how bad you feel for them. And you want to rescue them. You want to so if you are oh, I messed up. Oh gosh, I'm speaking too fast. And I stuttered. Give me a second. I'll get back on track. People will forgive you. Okay. Practice. When you practice, you have to do it out loud, like you were doing it if this is a presentation, like you were doing it for the group. Because what practice helps you figure out is where you're forgetting things, where you might be stuttering or stumbling so that you can change the language a little bit. But it helps you see the trouble spots ahead of time so that hopefully things don't fall apart when you're actually presenting. Oh, this is the tough one because I need to follow my own advice is watch yourself. You will see things that you're doing that you had no idea you were doing, good and not so good. And that's how you help correct it. If this is just too painful, Find a coworker, work on this together, give each other feedback, help each other out. Even if it's just 10 minutes a week or things like it does not have to be a lot of time, but this really is where you will see things that you did not realize what you were doing. All right. So how do we fix those things? How do we make sure that those things that tend to derail us don't derail us? And these are about the perceptions that we give people. These are the things, the nonverbal, the non-word things that we do that can sometimes really distract from our message. So these are some of the things that I want you to start thinking about when you are talking to people. And the first thing is your reputation. So I know a lot of you work in meal and you work in numbers. And again, it is all about how people perceive us. So what are the ways that they perceive us? So think about like the next time you are meeting with people saying, what do they think of me personally if they know you? What do they think of my profession? What do they think of the NGOs? Like, what is my reputation in here? If I know that meal people have a reputation in this country program, for just coming in and telling us we're doing everything wrong, and they're nervous about me here. They're stressed out. I'm going to change my tone. I'm going to think about how I speak to people. My message may be the same, but the way I deliver it is going to make a huge difference in how that message is received because I'm acknowledging where people are and what their perception is of me or people in my field. And I would say too, if your reputation is someone who always knows what they're doing, people really look to you as a leader, come in bold. That's what they're expecting. So there are both ways to look at that and to handle that kind of way of thinking. I do this too. Recommend setting up a virtual meeting yourself. I do that all of the time. Set that up. It's a great tip to just record yourself that way. Is great. So your body language can do a lot in making you relatable, in making you accentuate the style that you want to do. And this is about everything. This is how you stand. This is what you do with your hands and your arms, your facial expressions, how you move. All of those things go into your body language. Now, I love this picture that I have on here. I love her facial expression. She's looking directly at the camera. It, to me, shows confidence, and that's what I really like about it. Now, you've probably heard that like closing your arms like this is makes you look closed off. I don't know. If I do this, I just look cold. I think she looks a little chilly. I see some snow in the background. So what your body language and facial expression is about what makes you feel comfortable and confident. I was told literally decades ago, they're like, you do talk with your hands. Make sure you keep doing it because your voice is going to sound more like a conversation and your facial expression is going to be more like a conversation. So I will always, like, I talk freely with my hands. If you are the type of person who feels like it gets distracting and you start like doing this, maybe I don't have anything in my hand, I'll use my phone. Maybe it's just holding something in your hand that helps kind of just keep them a little bit steady, or a pen or something like that, I think can be really helpful. You have to be mindful too of not being too slouched and that, I mean, I do think, standing up, shoulders back, that kind of feeling confident type of pose. Eye contact can be a little tricky because depending on the culture, eye contact is interpreted differently. So be sure to understand the cultural expectations of the people you are talking to. I find eye contact important and effective. And even virtually, I will look at that camera. So it's me making eye contact with people. Because I think when you do make eye contact with people, it shows that you see them, you are interested in them, you're listening to them. So I think that those things are important. But I do like to make that caveat of what it might mean in different cultural contexts. To me, when it is coming to perceptions, to influence, to how I form impressions of people, tone is a big deal. It's just for me, that's how I read people. I will say I was in a conversation with someone not too long ago, and to me, the tone felt condescending, whether it was intended but that was my impression, and that was my lasting impression of this person. So you can do, if you, especially when you're thinking about your audience ahead of time and how, where they are in this moment, your tone can do a lot to calm things down, smooth things over, um, give that perception of you of being someone who listens and who is here to help. Again, your message might not change, but how you say it really makes a big difference. So this is part of the preparation of like, how do I deliver this message? How can my tone be so that it is received the way I want it to be received? And this too is where you can get feedback from people. Like, how is my tone? I'm going to talk a little bit more too about what to say, but and this kind of references that as well, is that we often like pull back some of our areas of expertise. We use hedging by saying like, well, it's just my opinion, or, that's just my 2 cents. Well, it kind of seems to me. And you have to be careful in the space of influence, because when you use these are what I would call hedging phrases. It's like you give your expert advice, or you give your main message, what you really want people to know, and then you kind of pull it back. You give people a reason to dismiss you. And you don't want to do that. I think too, if you want to make sure you're coming in not like as someone who's bullying or taking over, the way to talk about things in not so dominant a way is to say things like, "This has been my experience. This is what I've seen. When I've done research, when I've calculated numbers. So I've seen this a lot. Like, what have you seen? Like, what has your experience been?" So you still are expressing your authority on this subject, not pulling it back, but you're also recognizing that your experience and other people's experiences may differ a little bit. I think the same way about this as I do like with self-deprecating humor, like when you start off and you may make fun of yourself, or you say, "I'm not really good at this." And I always cringe a little bit when I hear people say that, because you're just giving people a reason to not take you seriously. And you really have to be mindful of that and those types of things. I'm also the type of person who has to like remind herself not to start things with saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Like, what am I apologizing for? It's just thinking about things like that. So a couple of things just in like, how do we start working on this skill, incorporating it into our everyday work life? Maybe not every day, but a little bit every week, and start thinking about how you're going to work on this skill. Audience is really important, and really thinking about, and you could do this overall, like what are my audience's general expectations from me? And what have been their experiences, so that again, I'm understanding where they're coming from. So when I start talking to them, it's from that space of understanding where they might be. Are they stressed? Are they excited? Are they skeptical? How can I help ease this so that they're enthusiastic about what I'm saying, and what um, what messages I have for them. I want to talk a little bit about key messages. There's a lot more to say about this, but the reason we want to make sure, especially in public speaking situations, that we have a couple of things for people to remember is that when we're speaking, people are just going to absorb less than when they're reading. So try to get across like just a little bit of information, fewer or less information than you would in a written document. This is what I learned when I was learning how to write for television. Short sentences, simple words, not because your audience wasn't intelligent. They are intelligent. It's just that when you speak, you're going to stumble over bigger words, more often than smaller words. Bigger words are more likely to be misheard. So again, keeping things simple, saying, I want you to walk away with 2 things, not 100 things. Because if that picture is like everything you want to say and you start pouring it in the glass, it's going to overflow. And what stays in the glass and what falls out of the glass, you have no control over. So making sure that you really think about, these are the couple of things that I want people to know, focused on that. And then you'll be much more likely that that's what people will remember when you're done your presentation. And this too, like when people say after explaining themselves perfectly, not sure if that makes sense, it does undermine. So I think the other way to say that is that, does anyone have any questions about that? Or what do you think about that? And then you can get feedback from people about, were you clear? But again, you're giving people a reason to think that you're not clear in your communication. So I do think key messages are really important. 1 or 2 things that you want to get across in that particular situation, but structure is also really important. So a couple of things that structure does for you. Again, with speaking, if you have a clear structure, it's so much easier for your audience to follow you and understand and see where you're going. It also helps you in like more impromptu situations like Q&A. It's one less thing you have to think about. You have to think about, how am I going to answer this question and in what order am I going to give the information? If you already have structures in mind, it's one less thing to think about. So one way is just to start with your bottom line. So often we start with background, with context, and our audience is like, where are they going with this? I don't understand. Where are we happen? So instead saying, I am here to talk about this. I am here to help you understand this. I am here to help you solve this problem. Setting that up and the audience is like, oh, okay, I got it. I'm happy to share. I have a bunch of structures that I can give you. Too many to go through all here. But I think another good way to look at it is like, what is the next logical question people might have? And this is a good structure for that. What's happening? Why is it happening? How can things get better? Or what's happening? Why is it happening? What are we going to do about it? And that, again, it's just following people's natural logic about the questions they have. One structure we use all the time in the humanitarian space is problem, solution, benefit. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's how we're all going to benefit from people. So structure is really a great way to do that. So as you're planning, this can be something for you individually. You can do this as a sector, as an organization, how this works in all of those different types of ways. What are my goals? What do I want to be known for? That's going to help you say, I want to be known for this. So these are the perceptions and impressions I need to give people to help me reach that goal of what I want to be known for. What messages do I need? Like what are those things that I need to say that are going to help reinforce what I am known for? We have to repeat messages a lot. We get to the point where we're sick of them, but then we have to realize that other people are just starting to hear it, just starting to understand this. What communication strengths do I have now? And what do I need to start working on? Like, I know when I talk about this topic, I'm energetic, I'm enthusiastic. I know my enthusiasm is contagious. But when I talk about this, it just falls flat. Or I'm great with a small group in person, but I get really stuck virtually, or I get really stuck when it's a big. So thinking through those things and how to work on them. So again, just like a little bit of homework for you to do. Take some time and think about how you would describe yourself as a speaker. The best version of yourself, as I talked about in the beginning. Like, what would those words be? Like for me, it's trusted, engaging, kind of like approachable, would all be those things that I wanted be. Maybe a little bit more in command sometimes, because I tend to be a little bit too relaxed. Some things about that. And then, so before your next opportunity, think about your audience. Like, where are they right now? How are they feeling? And you may need to do a little research to figure this out. But like, if I know I'm going into a country program that's really stressed, has had a lot of emergencies or things like that, and I have a lot of information that I need to work with them on, think about how you do this in a manageable way. But you really, it's so important. I can't stress that enough, that you have to meet your audience where they are. So look at the messages you create and look at the words that you use to describe yourself, and like, what messages can I use that can help me pair that public speaking style to go with? Because really it is a matching your messages with your public speaking style and how you get those things to work together that ultimately will make you a more effective influencer. So I am going to stop here. We do have, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have been seeing the chat a little bit, but I can check back as well if there were any other questions, because we do have about 5 minutes and I can stay a little bit longer if anyone else, and I know Caroline, I think, has some time as well to answer any questions. I know I threw a lot at you. I hope it was clear.
Thanks, Megan and Caroline. I thought that was really excellent. And it was very clear. Certainly prompted lots of reflection on my end about how I communicate and present. And we had a lot of good engagement in the chat. I did also drop in links to the 2 sessions we have coming up that are related. But while we have Caroline and Megan here, please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise them. We have the communications pros in the room.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll start off. Hey, it's Ron here. Yeah, what do you think about, because you were talking about self-deprecating humor, but what do you think about using humor in kind of in a way to break the ice, in terms of to break people's kind of ease people into the session, the event, the meeting, whatever you're presenting? Do you think it's a good a way to engage people, or can it go negatively? And if you do it, how do you do it?
I love humor, especially in our space where there are just not that many opportunities. Like, we don't naturally work in funny place. Like, we just do really serious work, but you do really have to be careful because jokes can definitely go wrong. And I would be especially mindful if you are in a room where you have let people that have different cultures and different cultures from your own. So it's funny to me is not going to be funny to someone else. So picking something really light and easy, I think helps everyone really. I was doing, a webinar, and this wasn't intentional humor on my part, but and it was a very serious topic. It was the situation in Gaza, and technically something went wrong, and my voice sounded sped up, and I was told, like, you sounded like Donald Duck. You sounded like, and like, it was this moment of levity that helps people kind of like exhale. So I think anything that gives people that moment to exhale, whether it's like truly a joke or something like that, but something light that kind of gives people that moment, I think is a great tone setter. So I do think it can be really useful. Caroline, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I do see a question in the chat about handling a hostile audience member, but I have some thoughts
Have that
on
experience. We have that here in the United States sometimes, where CRS is accused of doing things that aren't necessarily true, and we've had that experience. We have it online regularly on a daily basis. I know our social media managers have to manage that. But when someone accused CRS of doing something that was absolutely not true and it was like a horrible thing in front of a large audience, I just said, I'm so glad you raised that, because I would love to explain how that's actually not true. And I wasn't you try not to be defensive and just to provide the true answer or respond. Or if someone is really hostile, just to everyone else gets nervous, you want to your tone is what everyone else will feel. So if you are calm, then the rest of the people in the audience will think, oh, okay, this is okay. So if you say, I'm so sorry you feel that way, I would love to talk with you after this presentation, then we can have more time to address that issue. And then you can have some people rally around you, the host or whatever it might be. But your tone and response is really critical. Hopefully, unless something's really a scary situation, but whatever you're putting out is what people will feel. So, and Megan and I just want to say, first of all, we're here all the time. If you have something coming up, you can consider it small scale or big scale. Let's say you're presenting even within your department, but you want to do well. I mean, I consider every opportunity just a chance to get better. You don't need to want to save all the practice for your biggest presentation of your professional life. You can build all these skills so that by the time, like a tennis player, just practicing on a court, or any athlete, you're practicing for that main event. And so the more you just take every small opportunity to get better, then you're really ready when the stakes are high. And we are here for you anytime. So we would love if you reach out. Megan does this all the time, one-on-one for any type of presentation. But we're here, and few things are more important than being able to represent effectively for all those who aren't able to have these platforms and opportunities. So consider us available.
Yeah, I just want to make that comment because I completely agree with what Caroline said, and someone saying, oh, I like that. I'm so glad you raised that issue. Sometimes people just want acknowledgement that, I have a different opinion, or, I mean, hostile though, if people are rude and using derogatory language, no one has to engage with that. And again, calmly being like, I understand you feel very passionate about this, but this is what I'm focused on, and I'll have a conversation later.
Mm-hmm.
But that I can't, it's as hard as it is to do. If you are calm, like Caroline said, people will react to you. And you'll end up looking like the person who's like, this is fine. This is fine.
I think of it like a captain, a pilot of an airplane when you're going through turbulence, when he or she comes on and says, we are cruising at this altitude. If they sound panicky over the intercom, you're going to be panicked, but they sound calm and you're going through all this turbulence. So it must be okay. So you're almost like the pilot of those moments as you navigate the energy of the crowd.
Caroline, we have another question from
sure.
Sylvia around the golden circle, if you want to respond.
Oh, okay.
Great. Thank you. I love the golden, although I'm not sure if we can apply it so easily. And products are more technical. Okay. Yes. I mean, I actually think the evidence is the perfect opportunity in data to apply the golden circle, because so much of data explains what we're doing. And, we are doing this type of programming, reaching this many people, et cetera. But why it's so critical, what difference it is making, can sometimes be left out of the picture. And I think, is that what you were asking, Sylvia, is how, for instance, products are more technical for knowledge dissemination?
Yeah.
Sorry,
exactly. Sorry, Caroline. Thank you. Yeah, it's what I'm asking. I'm kind of feel that sometimes all these recommendations can be applied more easily into communication products like blogs or articles or things like that. So wondering how, or if there would be any example on how to do that efficiently in knowledge products.
I see what you mean. I feel like
you're already responding to me, so thank you.
I feel like the data supports the why. It's almost like the evidence that you have for others to make the case, as Megan was explaining. We are often in need of meal data to communicate as an organization. So I feel like that's the foundation that elevates what we are communicating for the why. So Megan, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that.
Sometimes this doesn't have to be overcomplicated in a lot of ways. And I often use, since I have a journalism background, I often use the structure of news and feature stories to help have that kind of inspiration. So, when I talked about that structure of problem, solution, benefit, there are different ways to define a problem. You can be very direct about it. Like we have how many people displaced around the world? I'm blanking on the number, 100 million people displaced around the world. And they truly need dignified shelter. That's kind of a headline type. Or I can tell you the story of someone who had to leave her home at a moment's notice, taking nothing with her. So I'm describing the problem that way. In this, I take it down to that personal level, and then I bridge it to the data, and then say she is one of 1 million people around the world. So it starts from that place of connection, but then showing you that like it isn't just one person. But now that I have you picturing it, now that I have you seeing someone, so it doesn't like it can be as simple as that, starting in that space of that small, of that anecdote and bridging to the larger issues. I think can be a really effective way of showing that and connecting the two, the inspiration with the reason.
Well, I don't think we have any more questions. So this is Ron. I just want to say thanks, Megan. Thanks, Caroline, for your
pleasure.
presentation.
Thank you so much.
We've got quite a few people still on the call, but I suppose if we don't have any more questions, we can wrap up.
Yes, just
Yes,
thank you so much.
Thank you. And please do share this on with other colleagues that you think might find helpful, either the recording or the following 2 events coming up. And we look forward to seeing you there. And just huge thanks to Caroline and Megan, Alison and Ron. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Hope to see you somewhere soon. Thanks.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.